Okay, here we are for part two. This is an interview with my father, Jim Deslondes. He is living here in Sun City, Florida, and we are going through a series of 30-minute interviews about different subjects relating to his life so that we can record for posterity the things that he's learned, the history of his life, and the all of the associated things that he's seen in his great lifetime. He is 83 years old, is that correct, Jim?
That's correct.
And he's lived a hell of a life, and we're here at his home on the 7th of July of the year 2021, and we're just going to casually go through a series of questions. Dad, I'm just going to say I've just set a timer for 28 minutes, and when you hear the timer go off, you'll have 2 minutes to culminate your answers, and we'll take a break and then go on to another video if you feel like it. So, what I'd like to focus on in this segment is career and family, and you can elaborate as much as you want in any of these areas. My first question for you, Mr. Deslondes, is what was your first job in the Panama Canal?
I was a police officer.
Can we hear a little bit about how that came about? And
Well, they weren't hiring. I grew up in the Canal Zone, and the Panama Canal was not really hiring people in many of the jobs there. And I took the police exam and got 100 on it. And having spent 2 years in the Army, I had 5 points as a veteran. So when they had the riots of 1964, which was the beginning of the giveaway of the canal, what happened? They started hiring a lot more police officers, and I was at the top of the waiting list. So I was able to get hired by the canal. And like I said earlier, the canal was not hiring very many of the Canal Zone, the people that grew up in the Canal Zone. It was sort of a policy to try to hire as many Panamanians or people from the United States. And, well, I'm not going to go too further into that.
I'd love to hear a story about your participation in protecting the Canal Zone during the riots.
Well, I was working 12 hours a day, and they had us stationed at what they called the Tivoli Hotel, and it was right on the border of the Canal Zone in Panama. And the military had snipers in that building, and it was a real standoff between America and Panama over the future of the Panama Canal.
Was there a lot of gunfire and exchange of?
I saw one person get shot. An army truck drove up to the front of the hotel, and he got shot from across the border. And a friend of mine got shot who was out filming some of the things going on. He only got shot in the finger. He was lucky.
And would you relate it to maybe like a scene out of Vietnam or something? Was it that bad?
Well, the first day of the riots, I was working for a construction company, and the riots started, and I was over in Panama at my boss's house, and I told them that I had been through several of these types of riots, that they should get themselves out of Panama into the zone area, check into the hotel in the zone, and they decided to stay back, and I went back to the Canal Zone. And when I drove into the zone area, I went through the back gate of an area called Corundu, and then I drove over to an area that was it was the cosmopolitan area of Panama City, right on the edge of the zone, and there was a lot going on there. one of the things that happened, I didn't see this, but it was quite a story. The Army had a post right on the border called Corey Heights, and the Panamanians had come up against the fence that kept people out of the post, and this young Panamanian fellow was yelling. There was a general right there at the gate there, and he was yelling at the American soldiers on the other side of the gate, and he said, "Shoot me, shoot me, shoot me!" And the general said, "Oblige that guy."
Jeez.
Oh,
and they shot him?
and they shot
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, that's one of the many, many stories.
Well, one of the stories that I've heard many times, and I'd like you to tell it if you would, was a famous story about your bust of a couple of ladies of the night in front of the YMCA. Will you tell us that story?
Well, my first night in uniform, after going through training with the police, we were given assignments on where to go, and the YMCA was across the street from the police station, and the sergeant in charge said, "Deslondes, you go over there and you patrol that area, foot patrol that area." And I walked around the back of the police station and was crossing the street there, and there was a big fight going on with two, it turned out they were two prostitutes that were fighting over, I don't know what it was, but I grabbed a hold of them. There was a crowd there, and I got a hold of their arms. I had to take I sort of knocked a razor blade out of the hands of one of the women, and they were fighting. Their clothes, they had ripped each other's clothes, and they were really scratching at each other. So I walked back into the police station and walked through the front door, and they were swinging doors, and I pushed one of the doors open and brought these two girls in, and the sergeant who was in charge stood up behind the counter there and said, "Deslondes, what in the hell have you got there?" And I hadn't been, it was my first night on duty. I hadn't worked 5 minutes when I made an arrest, and the next day they got 30 days in jail.
Oh my goodness. Fastest bust of all time
That's
for
what
a
I
Canal Zone
think.
policeman.
Yeah, fastest bust of a new cop of all time.
Well, my next question for you is, tell us about the best job in all the years of you serving the government through the Panama Canal. Out of all the jobs, what was your favorite? I know you worked yourself up the ranks. Maybe start off talking about the different positions you led through.
I'm going to be honest with you. I grew up playing golf. I was pretty good. I was on the first team from the Canal Zone to go to the National Junior Championship in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and so golf was my love. I wanted to be a golf pro. And when after high school, I got drafted to go into the Army for 2 years, and I got assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division, and I was there about 3 weeks going through pre-airborne training, and the call came from Main Post to report to the golf course down in headquarters of the I guess I can't even think of the name of the. Damon, you worked in that building.
The 18th Airborne Corps.
Yeah, 18th Airborne Corps. Anyway, I got selected to work at the golf club, and so I spent the rest of my 2 years in the military as an assistant golf pro at the Officers Golf Club at Fort Bragg. And that was the most fun job I've ever had in my life.
If you may, tell us about the story, how the job got wrapped up.
No. You don't want to hear that.
Oh, we do want to hear that.
No, you don't. No.
So my dad's being shy, but my wife brought up a point the other day that really rang true. When I lived at Fort Bragg, I married a 2-star general's daughter. He was the commander of the Green Beret and the Special Forces. And my dad had a little run-in to where he dated a general's daughter when he was at Fort Bragg.
No, it was the captain's daughter.
Captain's daughter. Okay. Well, there were some similarities there.
He was a lieutenant colonel. He was a doctor. He was a doctor. Yeah.
And we just have some interesting similarities. I think we recall my office was called the General Gavin, and wasn't General Gavin serving while you were there?
No. General Gavin, Jumpin' Jim Gavin, was the youngest general that jumped into France during World War II. And he retired when I was working at this golf club.
Okay.
And I sold him a set of golf clubs, which I considered quite an honor, because he in a way, he was a 4-star general. They had a big retirement ceremony there. He left that retirement ceremony and came to the golf club. He said, he told me this, he said, I promised myself that when I retired, I was going to buy a set of golf clubs and learn to play golf. So I had the honor of selling him a set of golf clubs.
Well, I spent 2 years in the General Gavin briefing room, briefing everyone from Colin Powell to General Schwarzkopf and many congressmen and senators, and the commanding general of the army that went into Panama and the army that went into the Desert Storm. And that was one of my stories. So.
That was 30 years after I was there.
But this is about you.
Yeah.
A little synchronicity there. Tell us about the worst job you ever had, whether it be with the government or just the one that you have up there on the shelf as
the worst job I ever had?
Ever had.
Huh. Which way?
I'm sure something comes to mind. Just something that you wanted out of and you were there. And
I've enjoyed every job I've had. The hardest job I ever had, I bought a charter fishing boat, and I would work 40 hours a week for the Canal, and on the weekends I would take charter out, and we would leave on Fridays and come back on Sundays. And I was working about 90 hours a week then. That was the hardest work period of my life.
But amazing.
Oh, it was. The fishing in Panama is out of this world.
We'll get to that. So, I'd like to know who was your biggest influence in your career throughout your lifetime.
Well, there's a lot of people that help all of us through life, you know. I had advice from really, really fine people. Really, really fine people. I've had a good life. I have no regrets in my life. You know, I don't know whether it was luck or what caused it, but things went well for me.
Sounds like a pretty good life.
You know, if you talk about jobs, when I was in high school, I worked as a starter ranger at the Army golf course at Fort Amador Canal Zone, and one of the worst things I was ever asked to do was to keep the female military officers off of the golf course until after 2 o'clock on the weekends. They didn't allow them to play until after 2 o'clock. And I've never forgotten that. I've been chewed out by full bird colonel women. And I was only a civilian when this happened. I was a high school boy. But so the military was doing those kinds of things back in the 50s.
So just for shits and giggles, if you had it all to do over again, what would be the ideal job you would have chosen for your life?
I'd like to have been a golf pro playing the tour. I really would have. But I recognized that I was a pretty good player, but I wasn't good enough to accomplish that. But I did, and later in life, I won 3 senior mini tour events, which gave me a lot of satisfaction. My wife and I traveled the country for 5 years. I was in my later 50s when I did this, playing in mini tour tournaments, and it sort of satisfied a longing that I had for many, many years.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you've told stories about being on a junior national tour with, I think, Jack Nicklaus or something like that?
No. When I was, I made the what they call the Central South American team to go play the United States Junior Championship, and I'll never forget in 1955, I was in Columbus, Georgia, and a fellow by the name of Jack Nicklaus was only 14 years old, and I was 17 at the time, and he was at that tournament. I was standing with 3 or 4 guys that were my age, and one of the guys said, "You see that little fat boy over there? He's going to be the greatest golfer in the world someday." Here he is, 14 years old, and people were predicting that already, and it turned out the guy knew what he was talking about.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. And
that little fat boy was Jack Nicklaus.
Jack Nicklaus. Wow, very interesting. So, I thought we would sum up career for the moment. We'll circle back. We were wanting to move into a little family. Do you have any children? And if so, how many and what age and what gender are they?
That's a funny question from you because you're one of them.
Absolutely.
But boy, have you been a handful.
The people at home don't know any of this, so remember that.
I have another son, Jim. He's older than Damon here, and they've both been a handful of young men. He's not so young anymore. Damon's 54. On July 15th, he's going to be 55?
54.
54. And I have a daughter named Lisa who has 3 children. And Damon has 3 girls who are all doing fantastic. They're all, he's put them through college and they're doing great.
And your eldest son, Jim John, has a son.
Yeah.
And another grandson, I believe.
Be my great-grandson.
Your great-grandson.
They live in Hawaii.
And you just had a great-granddaughter from one of my daughters.
Right.
And we've got another little boy on the way here in a few weeks, months. Anywho, what was your goal as you became a parent those many years ago?
Well, I'm from a different age, and you accomplish a lot if you can raise your kids, they finish school and go out and they're able to take care of themselves. So I was just doing what I was supposed to do for being a father.
Fair enough.
The reason I sent you to the school I sent you to is that my father always preached that every boy should have a trade, whether or not he goes on to college later on or what have you. But my father really preached. Now this was back in the 40s and 50s. He was telling people, go get a trade before you do anything else. It gives you something to fall back on.
Oh yeah, I was just saying the fiddling will really be picked up by the mic and it'll bother people. What would you say, how do you think your children would describe you as a parent?
I'm not even going to guess at that, because I don't think that I was that great of a parent. I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do.
And so how would you describe yourself as a parent?
Like I said, I think I did what I was supposed to do. Raise them up and get them educated and hope for the best.
Okay. Well, I think if it counts for anything, I think you're a fantastic parent, and
I appreciate that.
You've done an amazing job, and I'm very grateful for you as my father, and I want you to live many, many more years, and I want to have as many of these stories told on film as possible so that we can carry them on into the generations beyond.
I think this is an interesting concept that you've come up with. And I know you've done other interviews like this. It's sort of a hobby of yours, and I think more people ought to do something like this.
So, under the conditions that we're under right now, and you'll understand that in a second. The family conditions.
Oh.
Do you have any siblings? How many? How old are they? And maybe you'll tell us a little about them.
Well, I only had one brother who just died a few days ago, and in my opinion, he died from getting the COVID shot. Probably there's lots of people who would argue that, but he died soon after having the COVID shot. and I'm still struggling with that.
Tell us a little bit about Danny.
Oh, my brother Dan was a college professor. He was just another Canal Zone boy like me, doing the best he can in life. He did very well with his life. He didn't have any children, but he had you. He treated you like a son.
He did that.
Yeah.
And we will miss him dearly.
Yep.
Maybe you might have some advice for folks that were as successful as your brother, who died suddenly and never really enjoyed the fruits of his labors.
Well, if he wasn't such a tightwad, he would have spent some of the money that he earned. He left his wife a lot of money. He did very good financially. I begged him many times to spend more money on himself. And I guess when people have a goal of accumulating money, they don't think of anything but what the numbers are.
Now, who would you say, obviously your brother and you were as close as could be. Were there any other family members that stick out in your mind that you'd like to talk about?
My father was a good guy. He was a great athlete, and he did a good job raising me. I wasn't easy to raise, but he did his best. And he died young. He died at 51.
Maybe tell us that story. I believe it happened somewhere near the background behind your head there.
Yeah, he was going to a funeral of one of his best golf buddies, and died at the wheel of a car.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, it was right at the base of that building.
Yep.
Just along. What was the road leading up to?
End of Barnaby Street.
Barnaby Street.
Yeah. He died driving the car. My mother, he drove up onto the lawn of one of those houses. My mother was able to grab the wheel.
I'm going to point out for you where that would be. Right about there is where his father died.
Yeah. And she grabbed the wheel of the car and got her foot on the brake. But there was a doctor driving right behind them, and he jumped out of the car and ran over to assist my mother. And he told her, he said, he died instantly. He said he just had one of those kind of heart attacks where it blows up.
Well, what do you think is the difference between what killed men like your father in sudden heart attacks like that back in the day compared to now, where, if I'm not mistaken, you've had a couple of minor heart attacks?
No, I've had a stroke, but that's a funny story too. I was in a watch shop asking them to put a battery. Well, I was going to ask them to put a battery in my wife's watch, and I laid it on the counter, and a fellow came up to me and I said, "What do you need?" And I started trying to talk to him, and I talked like I was talking Chinese, and what was happening is I was having a stroke, and I realized it, and I thought, oh my God, what's going on? So I was on my little motorcycle, and I jumped on it, ran out and jumped on the motorcycle, and ran down to my doctor's office and tried to sign in. I was all over the place. I was mumbling like I couldn't say anything. And the girls in the office ran to the doctor, and he gave them a big pill to give me. And it turned out it was just a big aspirin. And he told them to tell me to go to the hospital. He didn't know I was on a motorcycle. So I rode home, and I had taken that aspirin. My wife took me to the hospital, and within a couple hours I was talking again. And I've been okay since then.
And how did that change you at the time in terms of how you looked at the rest of your life? Did it?
Yes, it affected me. You realize that the things can change in a heartbeat. You got to be careful. I think I started taking better care of myself. I wish I'd have done a little better with my wife. She should have changed some of her habits, because she had a stroke about 6 months ago, and she is going to be, she's damaged.
Well, kind of, I guess you'd say wrapping up this family career section. We've got about 4 minutes left. I'd just like you to talk about whatever it is that comes to mind in regards to family history. Any particular family things that you?
Well, I had my mother's first cousin was the United States Congressman. And when I was a boy and we'd go back to the United States, every 2 years they allowed the employees of the Canal to go back to the United States. And we would go on a ship which would go through Haiti and then we'd dock in New York. But my mother was pretty close with her family, and her first cousin was a congressman. And he invited us to come to Washington, D.C. And I remember him taking me to the House of Representatives. I was only about 8 years old at the time.
Wow.
And they were all Democrats, but after going through the Panama Canal Treaty and watching what the Democrats did with giving away the canal, I changed parties, and I'm very happy that I did, because I truly believe that it's turning out that Democrat politicians only care about themselves. They don't care about our country. That's an opinion, of course, but that's the way I feel.
Okay. Well, and then in regards to the, I guess you'd say the life you spent in Panama, would you recommend it for others as far as separating and heading overseas? I know you were born there, but...
Well, I'm going to a reunion of Panama Canal people this weekend, and there will be probably as many as 3,000 people at this reunion, and every one of them will tell you that they feel very fortunate that they grew up in the Canal Zone, because they were exposed to so much, and it was such a wonderful place to live.
Well, fantastic, Dad. These 30-minute segments, I think, are just about right for everyone. As far as yourself, you can, we'll tackle. Maybe the next subject we'll go into is just general questions about your life and, just your outlook on different perspectives. Maybe politics, maybe travel, career, those sorts of things, and. This particular segment's coming to a close. Why don't you wrap it up for the next minute and a half by giving advice to young people on the things that you would best tell them to make their lives as successful as yours?
Well, I think a lot of people in America are really struggling with where this country's going. And I really have no idea what these young people are being taught. In my opinion, America was the greatest country in the world, and what I'm seeing now is they're destroying that, what America was. And it's too early to tell what's going to happen, but it's heartbreaking, and from everybody that's from my age group looking at what's going on, they're all struggling with it. It's just, and in my opinion, it all started when the Democrats gave away the Panama Canal. These countries around the world realized that they could push the United States around just by crying like babies and calling people, saying that America was a bully country and all that. And that's one of the reasons they gave up the canal so easily. They didn't want to be called names.
Well, that's about it, Jim. Thank you so much.